Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 157, On Edge. Good morning, Aizawa-kun. Nedzu greeted him pleasantly. Debatable, he shot back under his breath, knowing full well Nedzu would hear him regardless. I've made good progress on combing through any potential record of your charge's extracurriculars. He's quite intelligent, you know. He hardly ever let himself get caught by security cameras, even when you were in full view of them. Nedzu ignored his dour musings. I wasn't trying to hide, he pointed out. I'm aware. I was just making an observation that intellect could be a rather deadly weapon if honed correctly. Nedzu explained, his tone coy. No. He immediately refused the request that Nedzu had yet to make. Oh, come now, Aizawa. He already has a class period he has no reason to be in. You said he was fluent in English, did you not? I'm sure the two of us would get along quite well. Yes, like a house on fire, no doubt. Hizashi's made him a JSL curriculum anyway, so he does have reason to be in that class, he corrected. So you're making the choice for him. Curious, your email stated your efforts to do otherwise. Nedzu baited him. Shota took a moment to take a deep breath before he spoke. The rat knew how to press his buttons so efficiently. Nedzu had a tendency to come on a bit strong when he found a mind he wanted to play with. He didn't want Izuku to be overwhelmed, or even worse, if Izuku didn't mind how enthusiastic Nedzu could be, he didn't want to see what would come from those two playing into one another. It is in everyone's best interest that you two interact as little as possible. He reaffirmed his stance. I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about, Nedzu replied with a knowing glint in his eye. In all seriousness, given what I have studied of Midoriya's track record with picking up new skills, I presume he will be fluent in JSL by his second year, at which point he will have a free period. I can think of several staff members whom he could benefit from having an informal internship with, myself included. But that's a discussion for another time. Your email sounded much more pertinent. Yes, I want Bakugou gone, and frankly, I don't care what the school board thinks. But you care what Midoriya thinks, Nedzu countered. Unfortunately, yes, he replied through gritted teeth. So what do you propose? I think we can kill two birds with one stone. Midoriya said we should test Bakugou to prove he's changed. Both of them, as well as several other students, are far too advanced to be challenged by those robots. The standard practical final isn't suitable for them. I say we pair them up against a staff member instead. It ups the difficulty without posing more of a threat to their safety, he posited. That is precisely what I was thinking, Nedzu agreed with a sharp grin. So, Midoriya and Bakugou against who? Someone they cannot hope to defeat on their own. I would say that doesn't do much to narrow things down with the staff UA keeps, but I think we've both learned not to underestimate Midoriya. He huffed out a laugh at that. He remembered how the kid had knocked him on his ass on the third day. He'd like to say that was only possible because he hadn't been expecting it, but Izuku's ability to weasel his way to victory was not to be minimized. If he had to make a list of heroes, he was even 95% sure Izuku had absolutely no chance of beating on his own. It wouldn't be very long. 1v1, no hostages, nor external threats at least. I'm not overly concerned with him. Schooling is more a formality at this point. He's already got 3.5 years of experience. As long as there's no way for Bakugou to pass on his own, then the test serves its purpose. Also, we need measures to be put in place so that there is no way for Bakugou to get the chance to hurt him. That is my one stipulation. Understood. And if they pass? Nedzu pressed. He felt his eye twitch. Then Bakugou stays on his tightrope, he will still be one misstep away from expulsion, he conceded. I would side with you should you decide to expel him, Nedzu informed. God, that was so tempting. But he had told Izuku that Bakugou had one more chance. He couldn't go back on his word. All he could do was hope that Bakugou would fail, which wasn't a great thought for an educator to have. You could expel him, he countered. I could, but I trust your judgment on this, Nedzu replied genuinely. How touching, he deadpanned. Unless someone else comes to me with a better idea for the finals, we will be proceeding with your proposal. A meeting to finalize matchups will take place next week. As of now, I think All Might is the obvious choice for your two miscreants, Nedzu decided. He grimaced at that. All Might, even in the state he was in, seemed a bit unfair. All of their quirks were brute force, though, so it would come down to strategic planning on the students' part if they had any prospects of winning at all. There certainly wasn't another pairing that stood a chance with those two taken off the board. Maybe someone in Shinso. He was a bit of a wild card with that quirk, but that was banking everything on a single chance. Do you have a better option? Nedzu pressed. If All Might is going against anyone, it would have to be them. But I think he's more than a bit overkill for first years, no matter how advanced they may be, he argued. I thought we'd learn not to underestimate Midoriya, Nedzu shot back with another toothy grin. A glance at the clock told him he didn't have time to debate this right now. We'll discuss this at the meeting, he said, rather than giving a proper answer. He knew Nedzu would lock him in a debate for hours if left unchecked. Very well. I suppose I shouldn't keep you from your job, should I? Nedzu replied pleasantly. He gave a vague affirmative grunt before spinning on his heel and leaving. He had a feeling nothing he argued would have any bearing on Nedzu's decision anyway. Well, nothing short of pulling his rights as Izuku's guardian. He couldn't deny that there was a part of him that was curious as to what Izuku would come up with in that fight, but he quickly shook that thought from his mind as he started mentally planning out much more reasonable matchups. It was only a matter of time now. Nedzu guessed that it would be less than a week before Aizawa made the connections about One for All, and he was rarely ever wrong about these kinds of things. All the clues were laid out in front of him. He could only hope that the fallout wouldn't be too messy. He really did think that All Might was a good matchup for those two. Posing Bakugou with the biggest threat they had access to was the only way that he could imagine the boy would ever agree to work as a team, and moreover, he couldn't think of anyone other than himself who could reliably beat a suitably motivated Midoriya Izuku. That child was nothing short of remarkable, and Nedzu liked to think he was one of the most experienced beings on the planet when it came to working with remarkable children. The things that boy was able to accomplish on his own were extraordinary. Along with himself, he wanted to schedule time for Midoriya to study with Maejima and Shuzenji, because though the circumstances were dire, he had shown himself to be quite adept at engineering and first aid. Those would be incredibly helpful skills to build upon. Aizawa's hesitance was palpable, and yes, he'll admit it, not completely unfounded. But he'd never seen potential like Midoriya's in his entire tenure at UA. Regardless of One for All, he had the promise of greatness, and Nedzu was itching to foster that seed. Patience. He could have patience. Human minds held complexities that he himself struggled to understand at times, but he was no stranger to the effects of trauma, as it were. The world had not been kind to him, nor had it been to Midoriya, but time heals all wounds. Midoriya would have his chance to flourish, and he was going to be there to make sure he bloomed as vibrantly as he possibly could. Did you talk to Midoriya? He seemed better for a few days, but now, Uraraka asked quietly as they waited in line for lunch. He's worse than before, yeah, I noticed that too. I did talk to him. Something happened with his family. Not my place to say. I thought talking about it helped. I mean, it did help. Obviously, you noticed it too. But I don't know. His life is a bit of a shit show. Something else probably came up, Hitoshi replied. God, he can't catch a break, can he? She answered with a groan. I don't think he has ever once caught a break his entire life, if I'm being honest, he agreed. Do you think there's anything we can do? I don't know what's going on with him now. It could be the same thing, but I have a feeling it isn't. Just don't ask about his family. And maybe try to avoid talking about yours. I don't know what will set him off, he decided. All right, thanks. I just wish there was more I could do, you know? She replied as she grabbed her tray. Yeah, trust me, I know, he agreed, and grabbed his tray as well. They made their way to their usual table where Izuku was sitting by himself. He had a packed lunch today, and the others were still in line, so they sat down in their usual spots next to and across from him. You guys can stop planning covert wellness checks. I'm fine, Izuku said in lieu of a greeting. They both exchanged a glance that couldn't be more guilty if they had tried. What? We weren't, Uraraka tried to deny. You were looking at me with every other sentence. Izuku cut off the obvious lie. Oh, okay. So he was mad. About what? Hitoshi wasn't sure, but it was enough to settle the usual stutter he spoke with. The only times he could remember Izuku being more mad than nervous were in life or death situations, so his concern quickly leapt from mild to extreme. Sorry, I'm just sick of everyone asking. Did you tell her about... Izuku trailed off and turned to him at the latter half of his statement. No, I didn't tell anyone anything, he answered quickly. Right. Sorry, just don't want to talk about it. I'll be fine. It's just they're making me see a counselor, and I'm not happy about it, he admitted. Oh, thank God. Hitoshi breathed a sigh of relief. Izuku glared at him so hard that he felt like he should have turned to dust. No, wait, that's not what I meant. I just thought something horrible happened again. This is much more preferable to the awful things I was imagining, given your track record. Izuku's eye twitched a little, and his glare did not falter. I'm gonna shut up and stop digging my hole now, he said, shoving a bite of food in his mouth. Thankfully, Izuku snorted out a bitter laugh rather than continue trying to commit murder via eye contact. He put his chopsticks down, rested his elbows on the table, and buried his face in his hands before letting out the most frustrated sigh Hitoshi had ever heard. It's not that bad. Therapy, I mean. I went after... He glanced at Uraraka, who was silently watching the proceedings. Well, you know, it definitely wasn't fun, but it had helped. He tried to encourage. I've been seeing Hound Dog ever since the U.S. So is Hiroshima. It seemed scary at first, but Shinso's right. It helps. Uraraka added her 2 cents. Izuku looked up at both of them with exhausted eyes, but he didn't say anything. His gaze lifted to a point behind Uraraka where he could see Ida and Todoroki approaching the table, and that was the end of that conversation, he supposed. He really hoped that Izuku actually talked to someone. He was tired of seeing him so downtrodden. Izuku knew they were just trying to be helpful, but he honestly didn't want to hear it. They had no clue what was going on in his life, and they never would. Whether or not talking about what had happened to him would help, it just wasn't an option. He could talk to Mike and Eraser about some things, and talk to All Might about others, but he couldn't tell anyone else anything at all. At least not without lying through his teeth or glossing over the vast majority of it. And at that point, it couldn't really be considered talking about it anymore. Sure, maybe talking about it would help, but talking around it? No, there was no point even trying. When he looked up for the first time in probably far too long, Ida was chatting with Shinso and Uraraka, but Todoroki was studying him intently. Wonderful. He was acting off enough for Todoroki, of all people, to notice. That wasn't a very nice thing to think about him. He tucked the overly judgmental and defensive thought away and shot Todoroki a smile. Given the fact that he responded by narrowing his eyes, Izuku had to guess that the facade wasn't very convincing. "Are you all right?" Todoroki asked loud enough to garner the attention of the entire table. "Oh, for flink's sake!" Yeah, I'll be fine," he replied. Both Shinso and Uraraka were cringing, but Ida was looking at him with concern. "So you're not fine?" Todoroki clarified, paying no mind to anyone else. He knew that Todoroki just wanted to help. He knew that he had a difficult time reading the room. He knew he wasn't trying to be pushy, but he couldn't stand hearing one more damn person asking if he was okay. "Todoroki, I don't think he wants to talk about it right now." He heard Uraraka butt in. He was thankful for that. He didn't trust himself not to snap again like he had when they sat down not 10 minutes prior. "Are you sure? You seem upset." He didn't hear anything else Todoroki may or may not have said after that. He snapped the lid closed on the bento he'd barely touched, grabbed his bag, and left before he could say anything that he didn't mean to people who just wanted to help. They just wanted to help. Why did they want to help? What about him made them give a shit? No one ever gave a shit before when he was... This wasn't about that. None of this was about that. Everything was about that. Everything had always been about that. There was no escape from it. He knew the day All Might offered him his power, that it wouldn't change him. He knew he was going to be miserable no matter what. There was no miracle cure for being fundamentally flawed, and there never would be. He knew he was spiraling, but he didn't know how to stop. What else was he supposed to think about when every aspect of his life was a shit show? The past never dies, and neither did its problems. Of all people, he should know that by now. End of chapter.